I was celebrating the 4 o'clock Mass this afternoon with it's the official kids' Mass, so all the littles and all the families especially come to that one. And as typically happens at the 4 p.m. Mass, whoever celebrates it during the homily, we have all the kids come up here, And so this is like jam-packed with all these little squirmy little human beings. And I do what I always love to do, ask questions to the little humans. And even before you ask a question, they already know what the answer is. I have a question. I know the answer. So I started asking them questions I started with the easy ones. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start with easy questions. First question, what do we celebrate on Christmas? And, some kids raised their hand, and some kids were so excited, they couldn't even wait to be called on. They just started shouting it out. Jesus' birthday! And I was like, good job, we're doing good. I was like, okay. And who is Jesus' mommy and daddy? Mary and Joseph. It was just, you could tell the excitement was rising. At a certain point in the homily, I might have lost control of the crowd up here a little bit. But we eventually got around to these more important questions, which I think have to do a little bit more with Christmas and one of the beautiful lessons of Christmas. And I said, I asked them how many of them had siblings, and unlike me, who am the youngest, I said to the middle children's and the oldest children's among them, how many of you remember when one of your siblings was a baby? And then I started asking them all questions about, tell me some things a baby can do. And, they were like, sleep, cry. One kid was like, poop. And I said, yeah, they can do some things, but babies really can't do a whole lot, can they? And they were like, no. And we kind of got to this very obvious point with these young children, who even as children can do more than babies can do. But I said, babies are pretty helpless, aren't they? And I said, you guys can do a lot more things than babies can do. And I said, babies need a whole lot of help. And even you, at your age, even though you're older than babies, you still need a whole lot of help. And then I said, well, let me ask you a question now. When you grow up to become an adult, do you think that you stop needing help? And that was quite a contention, because some of the little kids were like, no, you don't need any help anymore when you become an adult. And other kids were like, yeah, you still need help. And I was like, okay, here's the lesson for all of you little ones. So you never stop needing help. One of the things that we learn about from children, from babies, is that they are human beings in lots of need of help. This has been one of the great lessons that I have been so privileged to see in the life of my siblings, my brother, my sister, their spouses, and all of the nieces and nephews, and many of my good friends who are now in the sort of child-rearing, child-bearing years of life. And I have learned more lessons about myself from those little teeny children than anything else in recent memory. Probably even from my college years, when I learned a whole lot of interesting facts, but probably not as much about life as I do from little children and from watching little children grow up. And if there is one thing that is so evidently true about children is that and babies, is that they need help. There's not much that they can do on their own in order to help themselves. And so moms and dads spend exorbitant amounts of times, wildly inefficient amounts of times, being patient and helping those who can't help themselves. And it was at that point that I was able to really turn around, and I said, all right, now, you guys are all really good. You're done answering questions. Now I'm going to give the homily to your mom and dad. And I just asked all the moms and dads to stare at the little children and ponder that fact about Christmas and why it is that it is so important that we celebrate it. And what does it mean for us? What do we learn that we need to know from the fact that God became a baby? And perhaps one of the really important lessons learned from Christmas is that God loved us so much As the scriptures tell us, as our faith tells us that he became like us. And in order to become like us, he made the decision that it was going to be good to start that likeness as a baby. And I think there's something so profound in that, because a baby is completely helpless. God could have come in any way, and he came as a baby to become like us. And so it is so evident in the revelation of God, in the mind of God, in the heart of God, that God became like us because he saw that we were helpless. And he wanted to mirror us in that way, to remind us of the fact of that. Now, little kids, babies, they're not even aware of that, but in some ways it's evident to them that they need the help because they just expect mom and dad to swipe in and do whatever it is that needs to be done, to feed them, to clothe them, to change them, to bathe them, to console them, especially, to help them clean up their toys, to help them learn how to share, all of these ways in which we help little ones. And so God reminds the whole human race of this reality that he became like us to show us what we were. And the first thing that he did when he became a baby is that he showed us that we were all helpless. He showed us that we were helpless. And because he showed us, in showing us that he was helpless, he gave us an enormous twofold lesson about helplessness. And the first lesson about being helpless is the lesson of experiencing what it means to be loved by God. Because certainly the world teaches you and I as we grow up that we need to decrease that factor in our life. We need to become less and less that. We should be helpful. We should not need help. We should keep things all together. Organize your life. Get your stuff together. Don't be a failure. Figure it out. Learn your lessons. Gain your skills. This is what it means to be responsible, to be a good human being. And I'm not denying any of that, of course, by the way. But in the ultimate sense, and in fact, if we're all super honest with ourselves, even as adults, we realize, man, if only I could do that better. If only I could be X more. If only I could be Y less. We all know that we experience helplessness as adults. It's one of the most frustrating things that we experience as adults, is helplessness. We want to eradicate it from our lives. But in experiencing this truth about ourselves, one of the opportunities that gives us is the opportunity to allow ourselves to be loved by God. And that's the first lesson of Christmas. The reminder to the whole human race about what it means to be loved by God. God became like us because we were helpless. And one of the things that helpless people beckon for them on their behalf, like a mom and dad would feel as they look at their own children, is the draw that we have to help those who are helpless, to love those who need it, and to be, firstly, in the position of the one needing the love, the one needing the help. It's perhaps something that we lose sight of as we grow up, something that we fear to ask for help and feel like we should be always on the other end of it, the giving end of it perhaps, and not the receiving end. And so God says, look, I really wouldn't have become a baby if I wasn't like you. And that wasn't just for fellow babies, that was for the whole human race. And so that leads, I suppose, to lesson number 2 about Christmas, that it teaches us not only the need that we have to be loved by God, but it also teaches us the need to love like God. Because just like we all experience as we grow up, we do become, in some measure, those life givers to those who are in need. I asked all the moms and dads, just in their hearts, I said, we who fear that as an adult, being helpless, somehow are able to look upon the people in the room who are helpless, and we realize that their helplessness doesn't push us away from them. It is actually the very condition that draws us close to them. It's because you know your child is helpless that you go to them. It's because you know that they need help, that you realize that you're not the center of the universe, and you set your own needs aside and you lay down your life for someone else. It's instinctive in you, because that's what it means to experience that kind of relationship, that kind of love. And so one of the other things that Jesus did in becoming a baby was give Mary and Joseph the first look at that truth of what it means to love like God, who made the decision to make himself helpless to his own creatures. But these lessons, which are very beautiful and very simple, are also lessons that are hidden away from the world, just like most things are hidden from our sight in the night. Because in order for us to know what it's like to be loved by God and to love like God, those lessons are not for the proud. Those lessons are only for the humble. People who are proud cannot know those truths because they're too busy believing that they don't need anybody's help, believing that they can do it on their own, believing that the world is about them and everyone else should get else out of their way. And that's why it's sort of this dramatic and, in a sense, very sad truth that Christianity is, in a sense, is not for the proud. Christmas is not for the proud. Being in church, not for the proud. Proud people aren't the people that are sitting in here. Proud people are the people that don't need this. But to live life in such a manner is also to experience all of the, we'll say, the darkness that is out there. As so many of our Christian hymns teach us, the world in darkness and error is pining for something different, and yet it struggles with all of these frustrations because so many people lose sight of the most important and the most basic things. So Christmas came to whom? To those who were humble, to the shepherds out in the field, to the poor man and his betrothed wife, to those who meant nothing to the world, to a baby who is completely invisible and unknown on the face of the earth. Christmas came to them. Christianity came to them. Faith came to them. Love and God's peace came to them. Those were the ones on whom God's favor rested. So as we gather tonight on this most holy of nights, we get to learn this lesson and be reminded of that, no matter what age we are. But especially as we grow up, perhaps the more and more important it is for us to rekindle that knowledge in ourselves so that we may truly experience the gift of what it is to be alive, to live a human life, not simply to know that God became man to be like one of us, but also to enable us to be like him, to experience what it means to truly be loved by God, to be humble enough to love like him also. And that message is truly, and that love and those decisions that we make are truly it's like the stuff of the world's transformation. It is the very content of salvation that the world needs to download again, that people are aching to experience again, that needs to be filled on the front page of every newspaper, magazine, and internet article again. And who will be the ones to bear those glad tidings? Only those who are humble enough to receive it.